Thank you, Wabash, for joining us here in the chapel today. It is altogether fitting that we should assemble here as one community on the memorial of one of the most horrendous tragedies of our time. It is also fitting that Dean Mauri Ditzler, Wabash class of 75, be our speaker today. He is certainly intellectually qualified. He graduated from Wabash with a double distinction and received his PhD in analytical chemistry from Duke. He is certainly professionally qualified, as he has served students as a professor and as an administrator since 1979. He is certainly qualified as a Wabash man, as he was a student and now serves as our dean of the college. His speech following September 11, 2001 demonstrated those qualifications. For those of us that were on campus then, his words were helpful, hopeful, and reassuring. They were what the college needed to hear and needed to know. Now, Wabash, I urge you all to sit forward in your seats and listen carefully to Dean Ditzler's words today as he reflects on Wabash as a community of communities.
Some of you in this room may have read our admissions literature in the last few years. If so, you know that we are a benchmark school for the National Survey of Student Engagement. That survey or that index measures effective educational practices at institutions. The survey is administered at about 500 colleges and universities. Year in and year out, Wabash scores higher on those effective practices than do any of the other 500 schools. Because we've done so well in that survey, we were selected to be part of a national study to try to identify what it is about certain colleges that make them work better than others. That group of researchers selected 20 colleges, one is Wabash, and they've sent teams to those colleges to move around campus, talk to faculty, talk to administrators, and talk to students, and try to find out what those 20 colleges have in common and what sets them apart from other less effective institutions. So as a part of that study, a group of investigators and researchers came to our campus last fall. I have read their preliminary report. It's interesting. The report talked about our respect for tradition and our strong student-faculty culture. Indeed, it identified many of the characteristics that I believe set us apart as an institution. I was impressed with how much the team picked up in a short visit. But I wasn't surprised that they missed more than they picked up. Wabash is a mysterious place. I've been here over 30 years, or in and out over 30 years, and I'm still learning about the college. So obviously this team that was here for only a week, or less than a week, is only going to pick up a few highlights. They're going to come back this fall in an attempt to learn more about the college. What is it that makes us unique? If you get a chance to talk to them, what would you tell them? What does your list of unique characteristics of Wabash College look like? Perhaps you would say that in a time when colleges our size are desperately trying to get larger, we have by choice remained small. Or you might say that when many other colleges are hiding from the label liberal arts, because it doesn't sell very well, this college has fiercely embraced that distinctly American form of education. Or you may mention that we remained a college for men during a time when so many others showed minimal concern or even disdain for the education of young men. Might you say that at a time when college students are less interested in belonging, most Wabash men live in fraternities, the others live in units that value fraternal interactions? Or would you say that we honor tradition in an era when many other college students ignore both the past and the future? Well, like you, I've been president of the Wabash since first visiting back in the fall of 1970. We're such a complex and mysterious place. I feel that I'm just beginning to understand the institution. The director of the National Survey of Student Engagement, the survey we talked about earlier, came to Wabash 2 years ago. He was puzzled by how a college could score so much ahead of all others. He spoke in this very chapel. After visiting us, he said to us, "This college can't work. It shouldn't work. Everything that educational theory says, or everything educational theory thinks it knows, is contradicted by Wabash College." Now, on the other hand, he was open-minded enough to say that he really needed to start rethinking educational theory. There are so many theorists who are closed-minded and come and look at Wabash College and pretend it doesn't exist because it doesn't fit with what they think should work at a college. When I was a student here, Dr. Zimmerman introduced me to the guiding principle that while theory guides, experiment decides. That is, theories are simply mental constructs, while experimental observations describe reality. If Wabash is followed in a way that is absolutely contradictory to educational theory, but Wabash works better than most institutions that follow educational theory, then we cannot blindly close our eyes and pretend that Wabash doesn't exist. We need to think about what it is at Wabash that's unique and use that to reassess our understanding of American higher education. My job as dean of this college is to think about which of those unique characteristics of the college really matter. Which of the things that are so puzzling and so disconcerting to visitors are actually secret to our success. And there might be some things, some anomalies, that are simply interesting and a lot of fun for us, but really don't have much to do with our educational ability. And there are probably some things that are unusual and that actually get in the way of our educational practices. So as part of this job of reflecting on what works and what doesn't, what should we keep and what should we change, I've been thinking a lot recently about community. Our unique concept of community. When I interview prospective faculty, I tell them that if they come to Wabash, they won't be only a professor of chemistry or a professor of history or a professor of philosophy, but they will be a professor of Wabash College. I point out that Wabash College is such a small place that if we don't make friends out of our immediate circle, we'll have very few friends. Because of our size, we're first forced to broaden our circle. Individuals arrive here planning to stay for a few years. Students say, I'll go to Wabash for 4 years. They find that they're a Wabash man for the rest of their life. Faculty come planning to spend a year or two and move on. But they don't, or often they don't. We'll have 5 faculty members retiring this year. All will have over 30 years of experience in the college. So that community, that special community that draws us in, keeps us here for 4 years and then for a lifetime, is, though, a peculiar community. It is simultaneously inclusive and fragmented. It's puzzling that way. The fact that we are gathered today is unusual. Colleges dropped regular chapel convocations about 30 years ago. It became impossible to get students to attend unless there were severe penalties for missing. And colleges decided they didn't want to do that. But a few years ago, a group of Wabash students said community is important. We think our students will come together simply because they want to meet with each other and talk as a community. And it's worked. It's worked remarkably well. But it's worked in an unusual way. If you look around chapel, most often you'll find groups of students coming in sitting together, living units sitting together. So at our time, where we do something as an entire community, we still stay within our groups. Some might argue that can't work. How can you have a community meeting and still be separate? But we can't ignore the fact that while it doesn't work at other institutions, community meetings do work here. We have a remarkable institutional loyalty, both as students and alumni. We provide enthusiastic support to our athletic teams and our college activities. Our bookstore does a booming business in sweatshirts and Wally bobblehead dolls. $19.95 at the bookstore. As alumni, we lose sleep over what signs look like. Has the college changed the sign over the summer? Is it still wooden? Is it metal? So certainly there's a strong loyalty and strong sense of community. But some worry that it's a fragmented community. We lack many of the markers of a unified community. We don't have a central dining facility. We don't have a common mailroom. We eat separately. We sometimes pledge fraternity allegiance before enrolling at the college. Indeed, our community is a peculiar blend of devotion to small groups and loyalty to a collective. We can theorize that this doesn't work, and some will say it can't work, but we observe that it does. One of the mysteries we must unravel if we are to understand Wabash is our ability to blend many small communities into a single strong overall community. To be at our best, we need to understand the peculiar balance between the individual and the collective communities of Wabash. 2 years ago today, we gathered in chapel, and that was an interesting example of the way the Wabash communities work. You recall coming to campus the next day or two after September 11th? The new science building was just a steel structure. It was just a framework up there. And if we looked up there, there were men and women, steel workers walking around on that structure, putting the building together. They'd been there all summer and all fall, and we largely ignored them. But the morning after September 11th, when we came in, they were on the roof again, but this time they had unfurled a gigantic American flag and hung it over the edge of the building. It gave us reassurance that they would move on and that we would move on. We knew that we would probably never discuss literature with those steelworkers, but we also knew that they understood symbolism as well as did we. We invited them to our chapel ceremony and they came. They came and sat as a group. We were glad to have them with us. They joined our community for a time and we joined theirs. We were a richer community because they were here. We didn't ask them to become exactly like us. We didn't ask them to give up their identity. We simply welcomed them for who they were and what they were, and they became a part of our community, and for a time, they enriched us. One of our challenges at college is to persuade newcomers, and sometimes old-timers, that loyalty to one community within the college does not imply disloyalty to the college. Being passionate about one of our communities does not mean that we will ignore others to which we belong. This challenge reminds me of a special conservation law. Those of you who are taking introductory chemistry or physics are learning about conservation laws. Conservation of mass, conservation of charge, conservation of momentum. When you go home at Thanksgiving or Christmas, you will learn about another conservation law. Your friends from high school who didn't go to college will tell you about the law of the conservation of sense, S-E-N-S-E. They will say that because you have gone to college and gained book sense, you have lost common sense. They believe that there's only room for so much in the human brain, and the more book sense you learn, the less common sense you have. One pushes out the other. Perhaps you've heard this already. And we'll laugh at that or smile and think that's kind of a parochial view of those who didn't go to college. Because we will know that learning at college simply enriches and adds to and builds upon our common sense. There is an infinite store of sense that we can gain. Learning one thing doesn't mean we have to forget another. Too often, though, we fall prey to a belief that there is a law of the conservation of passion. We fear that those who have passion for athletics will have none left for academics. Those who use their passion on fraternity activities will ignore both academics and athletics. We fear that if we are devoted to a smaller group, we can't be devoted to the collective. But at Wabash, we are at our best when our dedication to one small community makes us better members of other small communities. Our dedication to several small communities teaches us how to be a loyal and valuable member of the collection of communities that is Wabash College. All of you belong to many interlocking communities. You are a member of a pledge class or associated with the dormitory floor. You are a member of a biology study group, a theater cast, a football team, to name just a few. You selected each of these because you were comfortable or had something in common with the other members. But because we are small, it is unlikely that all members will be exactly like you. You have something in common with each member, but at the same time, you have an opportunity to appreciate the differences within that community. Perhaps you represent football to other chemistry majors. You may represent theater to other Sigma Chi pledges. You may represent Texas to classics majors, or perhaps you'll bring a rural perspective to the basketball team. Your passion for one community should be evident to those in the other communities you join. We are finding evidence at Wabash that passion from one community spills over to another. Passion does not draw from an unread reservoir. It builds upon itself. I have long felt that excellence cannot be turned on from day to day in a college environment. If a student just goes through the paces at athletic practice, is likely to do the same thing in his academic work later that evening. A student who is passionately committed to overachieving on the field is more likely to do so academically as well. Students who throw themselves wholeheartedly into fraternity activities are likely to do the same thing academically. Clearly, this is counterintuitive. Most educators have trouble with that. Our first thought when students run into problems is that they're in too many things and they ought to drop one area to concentrate in another. But evidence is that just doesn't work. Since it's counterintuitive, we're going to need to gather some very persuasive evidence. There's a number of groups at Wabash that have been studying this idea of involvement in multiple groups, and they're beginning to collect some interesting information. And over the next year or two, I'm sure you'll hear a number of reports. Let me just give you 3 preliminary indications that we find from our studies. We found that in several recent years, those several fraternities that have done particularly well in the homecoming contest, chapel sing, the float, the banners, have also performed better than predicted academically. Not what we'd expect. Spending too much time on fraternity activities, we'd expect that it would hurt academically. In fact, we find just the opposite. Those who perform the best in those fraternity activities are performing the best academically. We also find that students who struggle academically after 1 year are more likely to persist to graduation if they remain active in a major sport. Right? It's just the opposite. We'd say if you're having trouble academically, drop off all the teams and focus on study. What we find is if you're having trouble academically, you're much more likely to graduate if you continue to be involved in other communities, if you intend to continue to be involved with your athletic team. Or we also find, across the entire NCAC, that athletes who perform better academically, perform better academically than those who just participate. That is, those who really throw themselves into are successful and get a letter in the athletics are more successful academic students and get better grades than those who simply participate and do not letter or drop off the team during the year. A model that seems to work when Wabash is at its best is that we learn how to be a member of a small community and then transfer that skill to other communities. We learn passion in one community and transfer that passion to other activities. We learn commitment to small communities and transfer that loyalty to our collective community. You will come across many communities at Wabash. I hope you join lots of them. Don't let anyone tell you that you can be committed to only one. Obviously, there are a limited number of hours in a day. You will feel overwhelmed from time to time. You will be tempted to withdraw and compress. My observation is that cutting back is rarely the answer. Instead, reach out to those communities that you belong to.